All right, I believe 15 minutes are up. Thank you everyone for still here. We're going to be jumping into our first panel now. We have Daniel Stone, James Wilson, and Jamie Graves. They are going to do a brief 5-minute or so introductions before we start the Q&A. I would just ask that for the panel, please try to reserve the chat for questions just so I can get to them. I'm only one person, so if I could just limit the chat to just questions for now, and then after the next break, we can open it up to chat and networking opportunities, that's fine. I would appreciate it. So going in no particular order, Dan Stone, would you like to introduce yourself first? You're muted, Dan.
Yeah, I'll just set my timer.
Okay.
All right, can everybody see my screen?
I can.
Okay. All right, everyone. My name is Daniel Stone, and today I'm going to talk to you about how you can take your JET experience, and in my particular case, turn it into what has become my small business, running and operating a ESL tutoring company. I served on the JET program from 2004 to 2007. I served as an ALT, taught at elementary schools, junior high schools, and even high schools. All right, a little bit about Two Birds, One Stone learning. Currently, we have around 11 language training consultants, and approximately half of those, 5, are former JETs. We provide service to youth learners, private one-on-one tutoring in most cases, homework help, helping Japanese children who are here in the United States, here in Ohio, who are their parents work for Honda or a supplier to Honda, help them with homework help, getting used to life in America, also doing some ESL language training. We also work with the adult learners, helping them with business English and English conversation in most cases. We provide online tutoring. We've been online since March of 2020 when the COVID pandemic went into effect here in Ohio or pretty much anywhere in the United States. Since June of 2021, we've been back doing in-person tutoring with the youth learners at a local library. If you would like to work at Two Birds, One Stone Learning, I would encourage you to visit our website. And one point to make to Kasha's presentation, even if you don't check off all the boxes, please don't let that discourage you. Apply anyway. Make your case in the email, make your case in the cover letter. And if you do mention today's presentation or today's job fair in the subject line, I will make your application a priority. Okay, so how I've utilized what I learned on JET. So I basically took those 3 years of working as an ALT in Saitama, and in a year and a half after that, back in my home state of South Carolina, I became an ESOL instructor, that's English to Speaker of Other Languages, instructor at Clemson University in Clemson, South Carolina. I was working with international students who had conditional letters of admission and getting those students trained up so they could be successful in their programs at Clemson University. Eventually, I was able to take that experience and become the center director of a language school at Ohio Dominican University here in Columbus, Ohio. That is the reason why I came to Columbus, Ohio. It was for work. It was a tremendous experience, those top 2 bullets. And I have the JET program as a foundation to make all these opportunities that are listed on the screen, make those opportunities happen. That gave me basically the confidence and the foundation to do what I'm doing now with Two Birds, One Stone Learning. It is a small business. We do have approximately 12 language training consultants. We were recently named one of the largest veteran-owned small businesses in Central Ohio. I fell in love with Japan a little differently than a lot of you may have fell in love with Japan. In my early 20s, I had the opportunity to come to Japan in the military. Was serving in the United States Navy, served 2 years on an aircraft carrier in Yokosuka. So leveraging that veteran connection as well on my part. So some of the cornerstones of two birds, one stone learning that I apply to the business practice that do have a connection to Japan in most cases. For one, two birds, one stone learning needs to be solving a problem for our students, whether that problem is, speaking at the local grocery store, communicating with the school's teacher, or like a parent-teacher conference, or if it's a sales presentation. We have to know what it is that we're trying to do and trying to work towards helping our students overcome whatever obstacles they're experiencing. Here's where the Japanese culture comes in. We got to be punctual. People have very busy schedules. We have tutors that they have back-to-back lessons and that sort of thing. So got to be punctual. We have to honor our commitments. If we say that we're available to do something, then we have to make sure that we're doing it. And then devotion, we have to make sure that we have our heart into the job that we're trying to do. And a lot of this comes from an article that I wrote a few years ago. It's called The Art of Not Making Meiwaku. As we all know, from our time in Japan, meiwaku is when you inconvenience someone, and a lot of it could have been prevented by just kind of honoring those cornerstones that are listed above. That actual article can be found on my website. There's a link to it right there. Real quickly, some inexpensive ways that you can connect your experience. Obviously here, the JET program, the Alumni Association, the Japan American Society, which is something that Kasha recommended. And then if you're looking to start your business, the Ohio Small Business Development Center. Thank you, Daniel Stone, Two Birds, One Stone Learning Principal Consultant and Owner. And my email address is daniel.stone@onestonelearning.com. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you very much, Dan. Going next in the list, let's see, we have James Wilson, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm James Wilson. I work for a company called Toyota Tsusho America. I apologize, I did not make a visual to go along with my presentation today. It's been a busy January. But I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate Great Lakes Charter reaching out, and I appreciate all of you spending the time to listen to our spiel. So I was on JET from 2014 to 2017. I was located in an island just outside of Niigata Prefecture off the mainland, where I got to spend lots of time studying up Japanese language as well as the culture. But I found out, and I don't know if any of you had read the profiles for the people that are speaking today. I kind of listed a little information in my profile about this, but I had actually intended to be a second language educator. I wanted to go into second language acquisition, to go into linguistics. However, during my time on JET, I realized that teaching was not for me. So for everybody who's invested a certain amount of money in a certain career path and you're realizing you don't want to do that, if you're not, you will recover. So after coming back to the US, I took a chance on applying to a random Japanese plastics manufacturer who supports the automotive industry. They took a chance on me. And so I started working for them, learning about plastics and other sorts of technology. And that sparked in me an interest in plastics. And then that continued on to an interest in sustainability, decarbonization, and overall well-being for the future ecology for our planet. I've been able to take that passion. Now I moved from my previous company, and now I work at, as I said, Toyota Tsusho America. And this company is it's the trading arm and sort of logistics arm of the Toyota Motor Company, as you may have surmised from the name. So we are involved a lot, probably 70% in automotive projects supporting Toyota and other automotive manufacturers here in North America. But my team is actually completely just completely not related to automotive applications at all. So I deal with a lot of materials that go into semiconductors and microchip fabrication. I also handle some other high performance plastics, but I've been able to leverage my passion for sustainable materials to be recruited, I guess, to my company's team for sustainability and decarbonization. So long story short, I recommend you guys follow your passions wherever that is, regardless of whether it's in line with what you've invested in already in your career path or in your educational or technical knowledge. This has been a very, it's been a very chaotic route, I guess, getting to where I am, but I'm very stimulated and excited about the work that I do. So trading companies for people who are not interested in working on one project or one topic consistently every single day is a very good option for people if you're interested in that. But please feel free to share any information or any questions that you may have. I'd be happy to support you guys if you're kind of lost in where you are in your job search. But thank you very much, everybody, for taking time today.
Okay. Thank you very much, James. And last but not least, if Jamie Graves, if you'd like to introduce yourself as well.
Yes, thanks everybody for having me. Would definitely like to echo what James just said, that kind of my path to where I've ended up was pretty circuitous. It wasn't a straight line. It wasn't anything that I did too intentionally, but kind of it's been interesting to me, particularly being invited to speak here today to sort of think about what kind of, advice or resources or whatever I could share with everyone who's looking to have, jobs connected to Japan, things like that. So I was on JET from 2002 to 2003. I expected to go for 1 year. I ended up staying in Japan for 5 years total. The first one on JET, the other 4 doing other things. I, particularly when I got there, just got very, very into the food. I mean, that was something, particularly, 20 years ago, we didn't really have much info about all the kind of amazing Japanese food culture that is now much more accessible due to the internet, a lot of food TV, things like that. And there's just a lot more organic interest in that. So I really just pursued that. I started working in restaurants. My first kind of opportunity outside of JET actually came from kind of indirectly from JET, that there was a company when we first arrived in Tokyo. There was sort of a couple companies that sort of catered to people that were on JET, providing services and whatnot. One was an importing and distribution company, food distribution, started by an American that sold, through the mail you could buy foods, ingredients that you wouldn't normally be able to find in Japan. So because I was really into making bread, I bought flour from them, and then was on their mailing list, saw that they were hiring when I was on JET, and kind of really sort of almost forced my way into the company. I mean, I went basically halfway across the country twice for interviews. Really, I think later when I became friends with them, they said, man, we felt like we couldn't not give you the job. You spent so much time pestering us and coming over. And I didn't even really think about it that way. It was just sort of, was just kind of so excited to be involved with that. Didn't really think about making a career in food, but my time in Japan, and I would definitely emphasize this, I felt like I was just kind of doing a bunch of different things. I thought the one consistent thing that I'd like to be able to get out of this experience is to get the language. That will, be able to, I'll get a lot more opportunities just if I have kind of speaking, reading, and writing. So really applied myself on that when I was there. Moved back to the US and kind of I was thinking maybe translation, I was looking at law school, stuff like that. And I ended up getting sucked into restaurants again. Just happened to kind of find this very active Japanese food scene here in New York, and sort of saw kind of immediately, and this is, I think, another piece of advice, is just to, the word networking, I remember thinking back on it, like in my 20s, there's something almost kind of like mercenary or kind of like artificial seeming about it, like you're just kind of shoving yourself in people's business kind of thing. But I think really what I realized, kind of the real strength of moving back to the US, moving to New York, and seeing that there was a whole Japanese sort of food, ecosystem happening. And I realized it wasn't about any one job necessarily, that I could like move between jobs. Everybody sort of knew each other within that, and kind of stumbling upon that and seeing that I had, some skills that applied to that and some interest with it, but also seeing that there was, hey, there's a lot going on here, and kind of having that broad network is very helpful. And that sort of brought me to my current position, which for the past 5 years, I've worked for a family-owned wine and spirits distributor based here in New York. And I've basically created their Japanese importing and distribution sort of division. So they hadn't carried sake before that. Now we carry sake, shochu, other Japanese spirits. Those things have gotten quite popular the past few years. We kind of were lucky with our timing on that. So yeah, hopefully, I mean, some of that is relevant information for you guys. Definitely, I think for me, it wasn't anything that I intended to be here, but it was always sort of seeing opportunities and always kind of connecting myself to Japan. And frankly, if I hadn't really applied myself in the language early on that, a lot of these doors wouldn't have been able to open. So even if you don't have a full command of the language, having some and having kind of a cultural fluency, I think what Kasha was talking about earlier is super, super helpful. And fluent, I think, as she also said, is like a totally overrated concept word. I mean, I can speak really well regards to food and now importing, exporting, but I can barely discuss other subjects in Japanese outside of like everyday stuff.
All right. Thank you very much, Jamie. I believe that we've introduced everyone. So now we're going to switch to the Q&A portion of the panel. We've already had a few questions, but if you have any other questions that come up as the Q&A session goes on, feel free to put them in the chat. Perhaps easier question to start off with, this kind of applies to everyone. I saw a few people asking. Do you have any advice for the essay portion of the JET application? So to any of the panelists, would you have any advice for the essay portion of that application?
Yes, my advice would be to have somebody, a professor in college or somebody in that regard, give you a really good proofreading, give you a critical, critical feedback, kind of challenge what it is you're writing. If I recall correctly, mine was almost like 20 years ago, it seems like, but that's kind of how the situation went for me. I had that previous experience in Japan and in the military, and basically just kind of got to barely experience Japan, and I really wanted to go back. I experienced enough, and he really challenged me on making sure that it was put in the right context.
Thank you. James or Jamie, did you have anything to add?
20 years ago, I can barely remember what I wrote.
I got some advice I can pass on. So I can second Daniel's recommendation, certainly have somebody proofread it. So there may be other people in this, or not among the panel speakers, possibly, but joining in today, there may be other people who've done this. So I was a application reviewer for JET for a few years, and I can tell you that seeing mistakes in grammar or spelling really drops your application down on the priority list. So that's certainly a priority for you guys. Then second, and so I applied to JET once and failed, got rejected. And then I applied again and then got selected. But in between those 2 years that I was applying, my first year, it was all about what I was hoping to get out of JET, the experiences I was hoping to get. But JET's about give and take. So you want to be able to tell the people who are reading your application as well as the interviewers what you're hoping to give to the communities in Japan. It's got to be more about what you can give to Japan, since essentially they're investing in you to bring something to them. So whether it's a passion, if like Jamie, you're passionate about food and you want to talk to them and teach them about American food or whatever nationality you are or ethnicity, passing that along or something like that. You want to be able to tell the JET program that you're going to be giving them some culture from your end. So that would be my 2 cents.
Thank you very much. Another question came up that I thought was pretty good was for James Wilson. So what specifically did you do to educate yourself about plastics and industry once you were hired by your first company? And as a former language student, how did you gain that specific scientific and industry related knowledge?
Yeah, and that's not always easy to acquire. And to be honest, I'm no specialist yet. I know some, maybe more than the normal person on the street. But if you're hoping to get into a Japanese company, I would recommend first targeting a manufacturer if you've never worked in the plastics industry or whatever technical field you want to get into. I would recommend finding a Japanese company that manufactures a product in the industry that you're interested in, since Japanese companies are very, this probably comes back to tradition, but in Japanese culture, they're always going to make sure that people understand the very basic building blocks of whatever you're teaching them, whatever they're doing, whatever you're trying to do. And so if you get into a Japanese manufacturer company, they're going to teach you the basics and make sure that they teach you everything to the point that you'll be probably really frustrated and annoyed and chomping at the bit to move faster. But they'll give you the basic knowledge. If you go to a Japanese company, I can't speak for an American manufacturer. I've never actually worked for an American manufacturer, but that would be my biggest recommendation.
Thank you very much, James. Before I get too far away from it, we had a few questions at the beginning for Dan as well regarding the tutoring aspect. In your company, how much Japanese do you typically need to know to help these kids, and what kind of teachers are the ideal candidates for this kind of tutoring? Because it's not necessarily just English, it's also supporting the student with other aspects as well, correct?
Absolutely. Your first question about how much Japanese do you need to know? Honestly, you don't need to know any Japanese. We have, like I said, we have about a dozen tutors. 5 of them have JET experience. So the JET alumni, we do work with them in terms of filling needs as they arise. But we have a lot of tutors that maybe they've never traveled abroad, or they've never been to Japan or things of that nature. So maybe they're wanting to go to Japan, but so don't really need to know Japanese. Having said that, knowing some Japanese is a tremendous asset. It helps. It goes a long way. It bridges that communication gap when you are trying to teach or trying to help a youth learner, or even an adult for that matter. And a simple Japanese phrase will just bridge that gap and save yourself, 30 minutes of time. We do more than just language training. We do a lot of supplemental support with your basic core languages, English language arts, math, the social sciences, history, and things of that nature.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Welcome.
We had a question for Jamie Graves. Do you have any advice on how to build networking connections with distributors in Japan? This person's husband and themselves wanted to make a relationship with some distributors. They're a popular culture store. Do you have any networking groups that you would recommend? And they're also currently studying the language. Do you have any tips on that aspect as well?
Yeah, that's perfect. Actually, I'd prepared. I'm going to drop into the chat a couple links. This is stuff just before this. I sort of thought about what kind of resources might people, not know about. I think Kasha mentioned at the beginning JETRO. She just sort of skipped past it really quickly. JETRO is the Japan External Trade Organization. They're very big. I don't even know quite how large they are. They got offices kind of all over the world in Japan. Really, their function is to be able to connect Japanese companies with companies outside of Japan wanting to do business. So I've participated in a lot of JETRO events. They do a lot of events here in New York. I'm not sure how many JETRO offices there are around the country, but I know in a lot of major cities you'll find them. In addition, within Japan, they are, sponsoring a lot of networking things like that. Really, there's so much with JETRO. I'm sure there's, I'm sure just getting in touch with them, they would be able to make some connections like that. Other things I just kind of dropped in the chat there. JFudo, the very cleverly named subdivision of Jetro, which specializes in food, was founded a couple of years ago, and they're specifically kind of trying to connect food manufacturers, businesses within Japan to places outside of Japan. JSS is kind of more specific with what I do. That's Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. They have an office or sort of a general public office building in Tokyo that you can go, like showroom, you can go visit it when we're able to get to Japan again. That's a great place to check out. And they are really kind of a big booster for the sake and shochu industry overall. Mutual Trading I dropped in there. They are the biggest importer of Japanese foodstuffs to the US. They have a history of over 100 years. They were started as a cooperative of Japanese grocers in the Bay Area in I think the 1920s or so. And now they're kind of this big, amazing company. They're always looking for people who can help them connect with particularly American businesses, because they're within the US, they're very focused. Kind of their main customer base is Asian restaurants, Asian focused businesses. And I know particularly in New York, they've been looking to branch out from that. So I know they're always looking for people. And then I just dropped in also kind of an example. My friend Zach, the last link there is a company called Kettle. A friend of mine, Zach, based here in New York, he just started working at a tea shop, just kind of as his like a tea retailing shop in New York, kind of got into it. And he sort of saw this opportunity that there was a lot of great tea growers in southern Japan that are considered some of the best tea, growers of tea, and they weren't represented really outside Japan at all. And he made a really smart business. I think he's one of the smartest guys I know on this. Kettle was essentially a website that they all warehouse in Japan. It makes it very accessible for people around the world who are interested in these kind of specialized teas to go to the website, check it out. He sort of creates that portal, and then it ships directly from Japan to people. And it's done by FedEx. It's very so straightforward, easy. He also has a shop here in New York that people can come into and whatnot. But really want to emphasize, particularly within food, there's a lot of opportunities right now. Exports of Japanese foodstuffs and all these things have just been increasing every year. There's a lot more popularity of that. So if that's anything you are interested in, I'd just like to let you all know there's a lot of opportunities now, definitely way more than when I started about 20 years ago. So hopefully those links are helpful, and hopefully that somewhat answers your question to connect to businesses within Japan.
Very informative. Thank you very much. There's a question that a few people really were pushing. Seemed this is for all panelists. So aside from any Japanese language ability or the GLPT certifications, do you recommend getting any skills or certifications that were valuable to you on your career path, or in general in your life, I suppose?
For me, I went in the direction of education. So obviously getting my teaching license in Ohio, that has helped, with longevity in the career, job security, being able to navigate the current, I guess you could say, current COVID pandemic. So that did help. If you are serious about being a teacher, it would behoove you to think about getting some sort of teaching license. I know that TESOL is really big, but if you're wanting to be a teacher in the United States, teaching in K-12, definitely want to get your teaching license. I could also speak more about maybe being a university or working in the university arena, if that's okay, or wait till later.
Maybe let's see if James or Jamie, do you have anything to say? And if after that you can circle back to you, Dan.
From a business perspective, I guess it depends greatly, I would imagine, on what your desired path is. If you're hoping to get into education, I would imagine that, just as Daniel was recommending, those certifications would be best. If you're hoping to get into business backgrounds are always appreciated by companies. I know that having an MBA or some sort of business degree is always valued amongst companies. Again, I think you would come back to what you really want to do. Since basic certifications, like if you get an Excel or Microsoft Office certification, that's never going to not be useful. But I think in terms of investing your time, it would come back to you analyzing what you want to do.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess for me, for myself, for my Japanese language learning, the JLPT was a good resource for me, particularly because I wasn't really taking formal classes. I was just using the materials of that course, the Nihongo no Ryokushiken. I mean, they're pretty available in Japan. You can definitely get them here with the internet and everything. That is, I think, as Kasha mentioned, it's not really the be all end all. It's kind of, particularly by the time my very last year, I squeaked by getting the JLPT level 1 certification by 1 point. If I'd literally missed one more question, I would have been out on that. But even passing or not, for me, it was a good challenge to be able to just like force myself to get those kanji, to kind of wrap my head around it. That being said, it is a pretty odd test. I mean, I showed particularly the level 1 example questions and whatnot to Japanese friends, and they were like, "Are you joking? This is like very abstract." Like it's very much kind of like undergraduate level Japanese. Sometimes like very abstract philosophical papers you have to read. I mean, not really the most applicable things. So there are, I'd say, while it's nice to have that certification, I don't think, particularly in the avenues that I went in, anybody particularly cared that I had that piece of paper. For me, it was more just the experience of doing it and then really leveling up my language quite a bit and knowing that I could use that in a practical sense. And then again, sort of a very niche thing in terms of certifications. There are a couple of competing sake expert certifications out there now. More and more people are coming up with systems. They're all fairly new, so there's none that are particularly established, but I would say I'm going to drop a link into the chat. This is something taught by this gentleman, John Gauntner, who's kind of the grandfather of sake education outside of Japan. He's lived there since the 80s, worked there as an engineer, got into sake, and then he kind of started this course, I think, in the 90s or so, and has been teaching it continuously, and he's really the center of that whole scene. So if you are at all interested in sake, whether that's from a personal or professional standpoint, his course, I think, is the only one, because I've taken a couple that I think is really worthwhile in terms of information and then also networking. I mean, his network is tremendous, and he is even within the kind of the sake food industry, he's not just an American guy. He's considered probably one of the top 10 experts on the subject, Japanese or not, within the country, and is very, very well respected over there. So he's a great guy to know. Also just a lovely, lovely person. If you take his class, he'll definitely give you quite a bit of that. But that's a very niche thing that I'm involved with.
Got it. Awesome. And Dan, you wanted to circle back to you regarding certification?
Yes. Teaching K-12 maybe is not everyone's cup of tea. You may want to teach ESL at the university level. I highly recommend looking at masters in TESOL programs. Some programs will actually, if you go into the program, they have like a track where this is for teaching higher ed, whereas you have another track where it's more of a K-12 direction, and you might be able to work it out to where you're kind of doing both, or at the end of the program you're able to do both, because they have like internships where you can get some in-class experience as a student teacher. So I definitely recommend looking at those masters in TESOL programs.
Just kind of as a follow-up for you personally, did you get your certification before going on JET or after? And how did you go about it?
I got my certification after JET. I was at the right place at the right time when I went back to South Carolina after JET, and was able to make my case for the position that I was interviewing for, and basically had to sell myself on those 3 years on the JET program.
Got it. Okay. So I think this is kind of another general question. So this person, they recently moved back to the U.S. from a PR consulting firm in Japan. They continue to path into PR. However, they're looking at shifting because they're not quite interested in the field as they used to be, but they're not really sure how to find the path forward. Did you guys have any advice for someone who is kind of looking to jump between careers here?
I'll go ahead and take the start on this one. For me, I basically, in addition to doing two birds, one stone learning, I also teach full time. In my MBA master's degree, I'm qualified to teach business education in the K-12 in Ohio. So I basically just went for it. I went for it, kind of mid-career, and so I guess you have to ask yourself, if not now, when, and if now is the time to do it, just have to go for it. We don't have to worry about, you're too old for this or you're not ready for that. You just have to go for it.
Jamie or James, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Sure. I mean, this is kind of a little bit, I actually can't give this advice from any kind of personal experience on this, but I think it is kind of if you are looking to get involved in different careers related to Japan, things like that. I've just found I started to kind of more actively using Twitter the past couple of years, and have I follow a couple different groups. There's obviously a lot of subdivisions on Twitter. One of which though is a lot of expats, people who've been living in Japan, non-Japanese people who have families over there, and they talk a lot. And then subsequently from that, following a lot of journalists who are based in Japan, and a lot of writers. I have a couple of friends who have written books on Japan, things like that. And I just, having followed them and seeing how much professional talk happens in those spaces, and I'm sure it's not really the same for every industry, but if there is sort of an area that you're interested in, I mean, it sounds like you're looking to get out of PR, but kind of finding folks on Twitter, and I've been surprised how many kind of active groups there are within that space. And it kind of at least gives you, a network of names, people that you can connect to, kind of common questions. You can also just sort of see what the landscape of what the concerns of people are within those spaces is. Like what kind of things, if you're in that industry, what sort of things are people talking about, concerned about. So, I don't have any direct experience of getting a job through that, but it's been very interesting to see a lot of different communities that are kind of active online in various capacities. I mean, Kasia had mentioned LinkedIn quite a bit, but I haven't really used, LinkedIn hasn't really applied too much to my industries. I think that's kind of for some different ones, but for Twitter specifically, I've noticed a lot of activity there, and I've made a lot of great connections through that.
Thank you very much, Jamie. James, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah. Switching from a Japanese PR firm to then a non-Japanese PR firm and missing that sense of Japan, I completely understand. I would, I guess, give the advice that you don't necessarily have to leave the PR portion behind. There are plenty of Japanese companies here in the States or wherever you would like to live who need people to do PR for them, or to be their media relations, or coordinate community events or anything like that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be transitioning to a completely different industry. You could be doing the same thing, but for a company that's in a different industry from you. So I guess my recommendation would be to keep your mind open to that.
Thank you very much. Okay, another question. This one is for James Wilson. So this person, they've been working in the auto industry for a number of years. They're in their last year of college as a business major with a focus in finance and a Japanese minor. Would you recommend pursuing jobs from Japanese companies in both the finance and auto industry, or just focus on finance?
Well, first, congratulations on coming up on your last year. I hope that your last year goes smoothly and you graduate feeling really good about it. As for switching, whether I would recommend you to look to a different industry or not, I can't quite say whether I would. I guess, as many people may have seen over the last couple of years, the auto industry got hit pretty hard by COVID, and they had to lay off a lot of people. So if you're looking to possibly be in an industry where there's smaller margins that force these mass layoffs and furloughs, then jumping to an industry like chemicals or electronics, that could also be something that's exciting to you. But the auto industry is a solid industry. So I can't tell you whether I think you should switch or not, but I think that you're in an exciting position.
Sorry, I just got another question came up. So thank you very much for that, James. There was another question. I believe this is for Dan, or possibly also Jamie as well. They say, I love that you started your own business. Could you please give some advice to people who want to do something similar in another state?
Sure. I'm going to refer to my notes. I kind of figured that might come up. Basically, first thing you need to have is a thinking out of the box mentality, because you don't know what the next big roadblock or big challenge is going to be. I never would have thought COVID would be a thing, but I do remember when I was doing my MBA, one of the courses I took, a strategic marketing class, they basically said, the worst case scenario, what would happen, and I think I wrote worst case scenario for my business plan would be, Honda, moves away like Toyota was doing at the time in California. The next thing you need to do is ask yourself, how can you be a solution to someone's problem, and kind of gearing it towards, Japan-related skills. I mentioned in a breakout room, there's a lot of opportunities for people being translators in terms of being a more cost-effective. A lot of the translators here in Columbus are pretty pricey. I guess there's two different types of translators, one that's geared towards automotive. I really relied on the Ohio Small Business Organization. They're located, for me, they were located at the Columbus State Community College, but it's a government-sponsored organization that helps people take their business plans, take their vision, and kind of turn it into reality. Also, network. Yesterday, I was at a networking event through the Japan America Society of Central Ohio. Made a few contacts in person. As Kasha mentioned, there's networking opportunities all over online. I hope that answered your question. If you would like for me to answer it further, I put my email in the chat, so I'd love to continue the conversation.
Thank you, Dan. And maybe I'm reaching, but Jamie, I'm not sure. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that or no?
Not a ton. I think just to reiterate what Daniel said about really thinking about outside the box, but also, filling a need, really. I've had, particularly, I think, it's easier for me now when I was kind of in the industry and sort of seeing what the needs are as a buyer at restaurants. And then now that I'm on the other side of that, selling to restaurants and wine shops, I kind of know what the needs are. I'm familiar with that. But I think if you're getting into a space that you don't have much experience in it, just kind of making sure that there is a need there to fill. Because I have seen a lot of people come up with business ideas that to them just seems like a cool idea. And there's actually not many people on the other end of it that particularly need that service. So knowing that there's a need out there, and then kind of tailoring yourself to that.
Awesome. Very well said. Thank you very much. I believe we are right at the end of it. We could maybe do one short question, but I think it'd be better if we just kind of call it here. If you have any other questions, I'm not sure if any of the panelists were considering sticking around for the break, but I'm sure they'd be happy to help if they are sticking around. We'll be taking just another 15-minute break before going to the next panel. I believe Lily will be showing the lists of the panelists and what their experiences are. So if you have any questions or wondering about that, that'll be there for you. Thank you very much, Lily.